Hello and welcome back to the live Q&A with me, Professor Michael Scott. We are here just as a sort of one-off because I've missed you all so much since we ended our regular live Q&As. It feels like a lifetime ago. So much has happened since last August. But we thought we'd come back together around Easter time just to have a check-in with one another because I just couldn't resist spending a little bit of time with you all in the ancient world. So I hope very much that all has been well with you over the past many months. And as you will know from kind of stuff we've put out on the Facebook page and in other kind of social media spots, things have been busy. Here. So we have not only started kind of the new job as Pro Vice Chancellor International at the University of Warwick, and we'll come back as a couple of you have been asking some questions about that and the sorts of things that I've been up to. But my wife and I have also had our bouncing baby boy Wilbur, who I think we've shared a picture of as well, and who is already amazingly 5 months old. Where has that time gone? I have to say he's been incredibly kind to us in terms of the amount of he's been doing some good sleeping during the night, and also he's very fun, giggly and full of life and laughter, so that is a wondrous thing. And we've also managed, as you might have noticed, because there is no longer a large clock behind me, you might have noticed that we've had a house move as well. So we've done all the things that everyone tells you that you should never do all at the same time: job, baby, house move. Yes, we've done all of that. Put it all together, thrown it into the mix, done it all within basically a couple of months of one another, and we're still sort of reeling slightly from coming out the other side of that. But we are now settling in. Exactly where's the clock? William's already asking. Well, kind of the clock is still around, but no longer today's backdrop, kind of because due to a house move, as well as the new baby arriving, as well as the new job starting. So I hope things have been super well with you all. And thank you, as always, for your continued brilliant engagement with the Facebook page and with the Classics Community Facebook page that you guys lead and take forward. It's absolutely amazing to see, and I love, it gives me such a kind of warmth to my heart when I get a chance to check in on the page and what's going on, even though I have had to take this little step back from being so involved because of my new role. So yes, it is a joy to see you all, and here's to our questions that have been coming in thick and fast, just like the good old days, to have some discussion about the ancient world. And there's also a couple of things to flag as well that are coming up. So without further ado, we will get involved with, well, I mean, the big news of today. Have you been seeing the latest amazing discoveries that are coming out of Pompeii? So I've just been this afternoon writing an article which I'm hoping will appear in one of the newspapers in the next couple of days in response to these brilliant new finds. And this is, of course, in relation to some of the new digs, the new excavations happening in Pompeii, particularly in this case in Regio 9 area, and to the excavation of a private residence, which is then up cheek by jowl up against a bakery and a laundry. And in particular, they flagged the beautiful black room, as it's been called, because they've gone for a very stark wall colour, just plain black walls pretty much all the way around, then punctuated by these little fresh, beautifully ornate and exquisite drawings kind of in the middle of the walls, sort of running round the room. And those images tell of the story of Troy, but from a slightly unusual angle, not from the kind of the war, the Achilles, the kind of masterdom, but actually looking at it from the perspective of the different elements that led up to Paris and Helen meeting. So there's the image of King of the Gods, Zeus, disguised as a swan, seducing Leda, producing Helen. Then there's the image of Apollo trying to seduce the professor, the seer and priestess Cassandra, and getting nowhere, but of course then cursing her so that her beliefs, her prophecies will never be believed. And then there is the fateful moment of Paris and Helen meeting, and linking between the two. So you've got this great sense of spotlights telling an amazing story, or that would have sparked so much discussion as this owner came together with all of his friends to entertain, dine, laugh, chat, discuss, all lit, of course, by oil lamps flickering around with the black walls. And then the floor is absolutely astounding to the room they found. So it's white tiles, a million white tiles on this beautiful white floor, so like walking on the clouds with a night sky kind of all around you. And you know, this is an amazing black room, sort of dining room, entertaining room, but of course it's the fact that it comes cheek by jowl, I think, with the bakery and the laundry, all of which seem to be owned by the same person, right? So it's, you know, a super rich Pompeian politician, basically living it up on one side of the wall, while on the other side of the wall his slaves work hard to be able to kind of give him the lifestyle that he's obviously become very accustomed to. And that's just one of the brilliant things that have come out of Pompeii in recent months and years. So do have a look round on the web pages for the pictures that are emerging. Keep an eye out on the newspapers. We'll put a link to it on the Facebook page if it comes out over the next couple of days. So yeah, that's been kind of my highlight of the day, is digging into a little bit of what's going on in Pompeii. But your questions cover, as always, a fantastic range of the ancient world. So Nick Dell has been in touch saying, where is the supposed large stone that Chronos swallowed instead of Zeus? And of course, here we're right into the Greek myths at the very origins of the gods, when before the generation of Zeus as king of the gods, we're into the generation before that, of course, when his father Chronos was in charge, and he of course had been told that he was going to be kind of gazumped by one of his sons, so he promptly ate them all. But of course, as the story goes, Zeus's mum disguised, or rather kind of replaced Zeus with a large stone, which Chronos swallowed, and then of course ended up kind of puking up all of his other sons that he'd swallowed that were still magically alive inside of him, and Zeus taking on Chronos and defeating him and becoming king of the gods. And Alexis, you've got the answer already. Where is that stone supposedly now? Yes, the answer is Delphi. Absolutely, indeed. So the story goes, right? And so the myth goes in that sense, that we have a stone at Delphi, at the sanctuary of Apollo at Delphi, way before it became the sanctuary of Apollo at Delphi, because of course the story is that before it was an oracle of Apollo, it may well have been an oracle of the previous generations of the gods, going all the way back to Gaia, the mother goddess, that Zeus placed that stone that had been that he had used to make Chronos swallow instead of him at Delphi. And that kind of story for us is covered in Hesiod, in Hesiod's Theogony, where that's kind of retold, so that the stone could be a sign thereafter of the power of Zeus, and a wonder to mortals. But then we get a different story that comes in some of the later sources when we look at, for example, the ancient sources like Strabo, which is where we start to hear this story that Zeus also let loose two eagles from opposite sides of the earth, and where they met in the centre of the world, which was at Delphi, magically, he put a stone to mark the centre of the world. And that stone is known as the omphalos, which translates as the belly button, the navel of the ancient world. So there are slightly conflicting stories here as to whether or not we should be expecting two stones at Delphi. One is the omphalos stone, which symbolised the magical centre of the world, as recounted for us in Strabo and other authors, or the Chronos stone, if you want to call it that may well have been placed way before that at Delphi, as a wonder sign to mortals of the power of Zeus. So are we talking about two stones, or were in fact they just one stone? The birds are too loud, says Sarah. Well, this is the problem of living in the countryside. I hope you can get used to it. We've got all animals. We'll probably have some deer wandering back through the back of the screen. Obviously a few rabbits, etc. as long as the birds. So get used to the countryside vibes that are coming straight at you, Sarah. So yes, we don't quite know. And the sources are slightly conflicted. People think, and somehow in some cases there should be two stones we're looking for. In some cases that they are just one stone, the omphalos. But Delphi is the place, Nick, that it's supposed to be. So thank you so much indeed for your question. Marietta Favalora Cardinale has asked about the library in Alexandria. Have they only found any books from this library? Well, Marietta, sadly the short answer to that question is no. So this is the Library of Alexandria, one of the greatest collections and repositories of knowledge in the history of the world. and it was known as the Museum, the Temple of the Muses, and it really had its heyday through what we call the Hellenistic period of history, so everything in that 300 years or so post the death of Alexander the Great in 323 BCE, and through to the arrival of the Romans really in Alexandria and more widely in Egypt in that last couple of decades of the 1st century BCE. Now, kind of post that time, as we move into the Roman world and over the following centuries, not only did the popularity and pull, if you like, of the Library of Alexandria itself decline, but also other little libraries sprung up in Alexandria, as did libraries open in other parts of the ancient world as well. And stock went to in other little libraries in Alexandria, like we know for example, that was in the Serapeum, the Temple of Serapis that was there in Alexandria as well. But by about the 260s AD, the Library of Alexandria really isn't functioning anymore. In fact, that's when it ceases membership, it ceases to be talked about at all in the sources, and it really is, even if it's still there and even if the books are still there at that stage, it's pretty kind of dead in the water. And then in the 270s through into the 290s, you have a series of invasions of Alexandria, and then Roman rebuffs of those invasions, and as a result, destruction of the city. And we presume that anything that was left of the Library of Alexandria by this stage kind of went up in flames at that point. And even some of the smaller libraries where we know some of the books have been taken to, like the Serapeum, they would have been totally destroyed by the time we get to the end of the 4th century AD, when of course there was the kind of outlawing of pagan worship and the conversion to Christianity. So we don't have those texts going forward. Now, Eliza, you're talking about the Alexandrian books appear in the Unseen University Library. The Unseen University Library? Oh, yes, of course. Yes, yeah. Gotcha. Yes, I see what you're talking about. Yes, I think they'll appear in all sorts of wondrous and wonderful places, in literary texts. Absolutely. And only we wish if we could have a few of them. And of course, different copies. It's not so much that manuscripts have survived in particular libraries through the millennia that has allowed us to read so many of the ancient texts today. It's actually the fact that copies after copies after copies were made in generation after generation after generation that enabled these texts to be handed down through so many different cycles through to us today. So Marietta, thank you so much indeed for your question. Sarah Scotty, you've been asking about Disney movies. Absolutely, yes, indeed, Disney movies. If Disney was ever approached me and asked for my suggestions for classical stories like Hercules, back in 1997, what story would you recommend to them? Well, now look, you're you're saying Disney took a lot of liberties with in the film Hercules, but on the other hand, it did introduce a whole new generation of that. Well, you don't have to convince me, Sarah. Disney's Hercules is one of my absolute favourite films of all time. It was the first film that I wanted my daughter to watch, and it will be the first film I think that I want my son to watch as he grows up. It's an absolutely brilliant read. And what I love is actually when you look into the detail and you listen to the detail of the lyrics and of the script, you can see some really, really thoughtful research has been done to bring some realities of the ancient world to bear with the storyline. Like, who doesn't love the song where I can tell you what a Grecian earns? Boom! Like, there you go. Absolutely fantastic. So we love Disney's Hercules. We would love there to be more stories done by Disney in a similar venture. Now, where's your Odyssey? That's what I would be saying to them. Where's the Odyssey story done by Disney? I think that would be an absolute classic. Where's a good old Jason and the Argonauts? Like, come on, we're missing those kind of stories. Or the life story of Medusa. For those of you who are fans of Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief, and particularly of the new TV series they've done recently, there's a really nice kind of backstory to Medusa given there, which kind of shows up that she's got a much wider story than just the person who turns you to stone, kind of thing. So we could tell a good fun story of Medusa, no doubt, or of many, many others. But what do you think? Which would be your myths that you wanted to see Disney make a film of? Let us know now, either by live texting them in the comments to this live feed, or indeed let us know through the Facebook page. We'll put up a bit of a poll where people can put in kind of to their thoughts. Medea, Alexis is saying, would be a bit tricky. Yeah, I'm not sure that Disney could work their magic to turn that into a kid's storyline. But I wouldn't put anything past them. I'm sure there is a absolutely brilliant song, that Medea could sing that would be an absolute hit, and a Frozen-esque sort of thing. In fact, on that note, it was my daughter's 8th birthday fairly recently. She got an 8-year-old's joke book. And of course, there was an absolutely fantastic joke in there, which you've just reminded me of, which is why can't you give Elsa a balloon? Because she'll simply let it go. Yes, kind of this is the sorts of level of humour that is kind of right up my street. Lee is thinking Oedipus as a story. Icarus would probably work. I think that's absolutely spot on, Eliza. Icarus would probably work indeed. I think that's a really good idea. Kind of any of those fantastical myth stories that you see really in the kids' mythical storybooks as well. Kind of, so any of you that are reading those mythical storybooks to your kids, kind of any of those good stories I think could be brought in. The Minotaur, Theseus and the Minotaur. A little bit controversial, possibly on the edge, a little bit scary in key moments, but you've got to have some scary moments. I'm imagining the Minotaur turned into a Disney's Hercules, Hades type character, kind of cool, mean but cool, all at the same time. I'm loving your thoughts here, people. I'm loving kind of the suggestions that are coming through. So keep them coming, either now, kind of on the chat, or indeed to the Facebook page over the next couple of days. So yes, kind of Sarah, thank you very much indeed for your question. Now, Alexis, you've also been in touch. In fact, you've cheekily gone 2 questions here, haven't you? But one of them, at least, a number of other people have been asking as well. So I will take both of them, but do them in the reverse order in which you ask them. The question is you asking, what have I been up to in my new role since I started as Pro Vice Chancellor for International Affairs at the University of Warwick back in September, and as a result, obviously, I've had to step back from doing a number of the kind of classics public engagement pieces, including, of course, our regular Q&A. Well, yeah, it has been a very, very busy time, but an absolutely fantastically wonderful, eye-opening and challenging role to lead across the University of Warwick on all of those international facing activities. So and to support kind of on everything from international student recruitment through to international student experience, our international education offering for all of our students, thinking through then to kind of how we're bringing in scholars at PhD level from across the globe, thinking to our international research collaborations, and then thinking through to our international institutional partnerships with other universities around the world. So it's a massive kind of field and area, but of course it kind of is hugely rewarding as well to see the students come to us to study, and also the home students, the UK students, benefit so much from the global community that we are at Warwick, with sort of 38% on average of our students coming from abroad and about 40% of our staff coming from abroad as well. So it's been a real joy, and a couple of highlights for me. Well, kind of at the beginning of the year, back in September, October, we hosted a welcoming reception for a number of our international scholars who were coming from vastly different parts of the world to study at Warwick, particularly at that graduate level, the PhD level. And it was awe-inspiring to see often the journeys they had been on in order to come to and arrive at Warwick to be able to commence their studies, and what they were already doing, which was networking across that wide global community. And I spent a lot of time asking people to kind of just understand those cultural differences and get across those cultural boundaries. I took an English proverb, which was, you can't have your cake and eat it. And sort of said, okay, so, the meaning of this proverb, right, is you can't have everything all at the same time. But how would you say that in your culture? What would be the expression that you use? And some of the translated cultural expressions that have come back have been remarkable. So the French will say, for instance, you can't have butter and money for butter. Because of, and you start to get a sense here that maybe these expressions revolve around culturally really important things for each of those cultures. So, of course, British and cake, I'm surprised it's not about tea, but it's about cake. The French, butter, extremely important. You can see why the French have the expression about butter. The Romanians, well, they take a slightly different tack, and they say you can't keep the goat and the cabbage happy. at the same time, because one will have to be eating the other or go hungry, which I thought was absolutely brilliant way of putting it. One of the students who had come to us from Libya was saying that actually they use a much more kind of religious-based expression in the sense that you can't have a good pilgrimage and an easy road. Right, and kind of the idea that actually pilgrimage, to be a good pilgrimage, needs to be a difficult journey. And then already Marietta's asked about the Italian version, and this absolutely takes the biscuit, because the Italian version of you can't have your cake and eat it is this: you can't have a full barrel of wine and a drunk wife. You can't have a full barrel of wine and a drunk wife. That's the Italian expression for the alternative, for the version of you can't have your cake and eat it. So do equally, if you're listening to this from around the globe and you're coming from a culture that we haven't mentioned so far, the French, the Italians, the Romanians, kind of Libyans, etc., tell us, how do you say it in your country? I think in China, for instance, they say you can't have kind of a fish in hand and a dry paw. I think that kind of it's something like that in China as well. So kind of let us know in the different parts of the world you come from. How do you give that expression of you can't have your cake and eat it? You can't have everything all at the same time. Let us know. Let us know. I want to compile a much longer global list, but having that was a real highlight for me at the beginning of the year. And then I found myself kind of within the first week of the job in Romania, in Cluj-Napoca in Romania, visiting one of our university partners there, the University Babeș-Bolyai. And we had an absolutely fantastic visit, working with them and working out how the two universities will kind of work more closely together. And in fact, we're off there again next week, as well as meeting with other university partners that we all joined together as part of a guild of European research intensive universities. But what I was amazed to find in Cluj is how much they celebrate the fact that Cluj was part of the territories conquered by the Roman Emperor Trajan when he, in his campaign against the Dacians. So they had statues of Trajan in the street. And then, of course, they had an entire fast food chain that was called Spartan Chicken. Now, I'm not sure entirely if calling something Spartan would encourage me to want to feed there, but Spartan Chicken was a successful fast food chain happening in Romania. It's amazing where the Greeks and Romans get to, isn't it? And then obviously also dialing forward to February, just in February more recently, I undertook a trip over to Australia, to Melbourne, Australia, to visit with our partner university there, Monash University in Melbourne, Australia. And we had an extremely useful and kind of important couple of days, because there's been lots of changes of leadership on both sides, getting to know one another and kind of reaffirming our commitment to working together into a second decade of our alliance. But two things stood out. One, on the one hand, was it gave me a chance, because I was there for a number of days, and we were tweeting photos from Melbourne as well, and kind of going out to actually meet with some of you guys, the Classics community, who have joined in on the Classics page and in these Q&As from Melbourne, Australia, and actually to be able to put names to faces and to meet some of you in person. So that was wonderful. Thank you so much. And I really hope that we can do that again in the future at some different stage. And secondly, we had the most awesome meteorological conditions. So when I turned up in Melbourne, it was about 20 degrees. Over the next day and a half, it went up to 37 degrees Celsius, absolutely swelteringly dry heat. And then suddenly we had this kind of terrific typhoon storm blow in that took the temperature back down to 20 degrees within just an hour. And we had storming rains, winds, trees down, roads flooded. The lights were flickering on and off again in the buildings that we were in the university. It was absolutely cataclysmic. And apparently Melbourne is still actually recovering from the damage of that 1 hour storm that came about with that cold and hot fronts meeting one another and taking the temperature down so quickly. So what a place to spend a little bit of time. And then finally, just recently in Warwick in March, we hosted the annual Classical Association Conference, which some of you may even have come to, which it was a delight to be at and to welcome our plenary lecturer, Professor Yanis Hamilakis, who was coming all the way to us from Brown University in the US. To deliver his lecture thinking about the Acropolis through time, and particularly its renovation as a marker, as an archaeological site post the Greek War of Independence in the 1820s. So absolutely fantastic. It's been a joy. And looking forward, one of the things you might start to see some announcements about, and I'm sure we'll put something out on the Facebook page as well, is about what we're calling the Marco Polo program. So this year, 2024, is the 700th anniversary of the death of Marco Polo. Polo in Venice. And Venice, of course, is hosting a large number of celebrations. But Marco Polo, of course, was famous for going to Venice to China, and he's not the only one that did so. There were others who went from west to east, but crucially also, there have been lots of travellers through time who have been going from east to west. And so we're hosting a range of activities, both in Warwick, in our campus in Warwick, at our base, the Warwick Venice Centre in Venice, and in conjunction with our partners in China, so Shanghai Jiao Tong University in Shanghai, for instance, that are looking at the important legacies of all of these travellers who have gone west-east and east-west over time, the importance of cultural exchange and interaction, and as a result trying to say a little something about how Warwick as a university sees its place and its global place within the world, and the importance of its global relationships and global partnerships. So you'll be seeing, there'll be events for the public in Warwick, as well as kind of more academic events across Warwick, Venice and China, as well as events involving our students, and we'll be putting that together around with a nice comms campaign around it coming out between June and December this year, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Right, back to the questions. It sounds we still have more to go. So Alexis, you had your other question, which was around the stories of the Iliad and the Odyssey. You know they're just stories, but what you want to know is what they were doing. Now, of course, in the stories of the Iliad and the Odyssey, we've got all the myths about the fact that there's Helen, who's nabbed by Paris, taken back to Troy. So the idea of the Greeks going there was really to kind of get back Helen. And once, after 10 years of war, they had got back Helen and destroyed Troy, then kind of, frankly, they were off again. There was no reason for them to be there. But if we start to look into the more historical realities of what we think might have been happening around about this time, around about 1200 BCE, which is at the end, kind of the late Bronze Age period, we think that there was obviously a place called Troy, which is modern day Hisarlik. We from archaeological excavation have found a city that does seem to have had some kind of destruction around this time, and what it seems to be is kind of actually just kind of cities in these last phases of the Bronze Age, kind of just riling up and trying to kind of find a way to survive as these civilizations start to crumble a little bit. And this kind of all-out kind of affront on Troy and kind of Hisarlik was probably the last great campaign of the Bronze Age. So it's not even so much about whether they wanted to stay there in the historical reality of whether it was a useful base for them or not. It's whether or not they could actually, as a wider civilization, be able to stay there as things started to crumble away from the Bronze Age into what traditionally is known for a period of time as the Dark Ages. But of course, the actual site where we think Troy is, Hisarlik, does continue to be inhabited in one form or another by one group or another, right the way through into the Roman period. So it has a long history all at the same time. So Alexis, thank you so much indeed for your question. Now, we've had a question also, which we need to finish up on because we're almost at our half hour already. This is from Laura and Caroline from Sister History. Can you see any opportunities for experimental archaeology in progressing the research of oracular divination? Brackets. Has anyone ever tried actually sitting on a tripod inhaling fumes for a day? Well, Laura and Caroline, yes, they have. In fact, this was a crucial part of the story and history of the excavation of Delphi, because when they went to excavate Delphi, they had all the literary texts in their hands that talked about all the different ways that this stuff was supposed to happen, about the Pythian priestess sitting on a tripod inhaling these fumes. So when they excavated the site, they absolutely expected to find a nice hole in the ground in the side of the temple, which a tripod could stand over, etc. And they were really disappointed when they didn't find such a hole, and they were thinking, are the ancient sources lying to us? Could it have happened in another way? And so lots of different experiments were done, and there were German archaeologists who were, for example, eating laurel leaves like crazy, because one of the other sources talked about the fact potentially that the Pythian priestess had just eaten laurel leaves, and if you use enough of them, so supposedly you could get high and go into some kind of trance state. But this German archaeologist reported that he felt no different after eating a whole bunch of laurel leaves. Now, this continued all the way through until the 2000s, when two geologists actually proved that there are fissures in the rock just below Delphi, and as a result, gases do escape up to the surface and are present in the water at the surface and indeed in the rock formations at the surface, and that gas is ethylene. And ethylene actually during kind of the 20th century was used in the US to breathe in as an anaesthetic, and it sent you into a trance-meditative kind of comatose state. So we know that it does have an impact. So it is possible that kind of at some point within an enclosed environment like a temple, somebody could have been breathing in enough quantities to send them into some kind of trance. But lots of comparative work has been done with oracular divination in all of its forms in different cultures through different times and periods. One of my favourite books is by a scholar called Evans Pritchard, written back in 1977, which is called Witchcraft, Oracles and Magic Among the Azande. And this is kind of if you like, an anthropological study of different cultures that still kind of in the time, during the 20th century, were using oracular divination done in very, very different forms as a way for making decisions within their culture and society. So it was looking at how and why not so much the mechanism of divination might be applicable back to the ancient Greeks and Romans, but how did divination as a process actually work in order to have enough authority and work as a way of making a decision. And what they found is that actually kind of it works, pretty much just as well as anyone trying to guess what is going to happen next. So there was lots of comparative and comparable anthropological research that was done as well. Right, there we are. We are already at the end of our half hour. Oh no! So quick flags to you. BBC's Italy's Invisible Cities, my series with Xander Armstrong in Venice, Naples and Florence, is being repeated right now. So we had Naples over the weekend. Just an hour ago was Venice, and tomorrow, Friday the 12th of April at 3:45 is Florence, if you want to tune in and have a look at that. On Thursday, the 25th of April, 7 p.m, I'm going to be talking to the Southport and Birkdale Classical Association on the historical context of Oedipus the King. So come along if you can to join that. And then just a couple of days later, on Saturday, the 27th of April, at the Lytham St Anne's Classical Association, we are celebrating our 10-year anniversary of the Lytham St Anne's Classical Association. And we'll be there the whole day for both the Ancient Worlds competition, fancy dress, loads of cake, and I'll be giving a lecture as well about Themistocles, the highs and lows of life at the epicenter of Athenian history. And this relates to my new book project, which should be coming out kind of at some point later this year or possibly into 2025 with Yale University Press. But in the meantime, you can get hold of my current book on the history of archaeology and of excavation. X marks the spot. It will be coming out in paperback on the 6th of June. So there will be some events as well in London, as well as some new podcasts coming out around then to celebrate that. Paul Carolan, yes, you've just talked. Yes, the BBC have a series about the Pompeii digs coming out next Monday, the 15th of April. So the new digs at Pompeii series. So have an amazing time. Get involved with the ancient world. Thank you so much. Continue to participate in the Facebook group and in the Classics community group because it's absolutely brilliant to see. And I look forward to joining you again when we can, maybe in a couple of months' time, to do another little check-in about the ancient world altogether. This has been a pleasure. Remember to send through to the Facebook page your ideas for Disney's Hercules, as well as your cultural equivalents of how you say that you can't have your cake and eat it. Thank you all. Take care. See you soon. Bye-bye.